I'm here today with the fabulous Janice Fiamengo, who's a professor of English at the University of Ottawa, and she's very actively involved in speaking out about men's rights. What I'm going to do is start off showing some of the footage of us both under attack on college campuses for challenging the feminist orthodoxy.
I like to call her Janice Fiamengo. She's a rape apologist.
Janice Fiamengo's got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho.
Yes means yes, no means no. Bettina and has got to go. Yes means yes, no means no.
That one there.
Has got to go.
My hope that as a result of my talk, a few of you may decide to... Okay, you know, it's the signature... It's the signature of a totalitarian ideology to attempt to quash dissent. So every time you interrupt, you're merely showing your repressive tendencies. You're not showing anything about your virtue.
Rape is rightly a criminal offence and should be treated very seriously. The accused might use to defend himself and really putting him at jeopardy of wrongful conviction.
One of the things you've highlighted in a lot of your YouTube videos is examples of white men, particularly, being taken down, being forced out of their jobs in academic jobs across the world, targeted, part of the Me Too movement, particularly now, but also, you know, spurious accusations about their academic work, whatever. Can you give me some of your favorite, or I suppose most horrendous examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, this could be the whole subject of an hour-long discussion so easily. It's I think one of the most terrifying features of our present age, that every single man in a university position, of course any man in any position of power, knows that he is just one accusation away from career and reputational ruin. And there are so many outrageous cases, some of which the man actually perhaps did what he has been accused of doing. And often the accusations are of such minor transgressions against propriety. There's a case that I did a video about not too long ago, and this has been ongoing for years. This is a fellow at a Canadian university, Brock University in Ontario, not a particularly prestigious place, but perfectly okay university. This man was an esteemed historian, a historian of modern warfare. His name is Schimmelpenninck, and he, 4 years ago, was accused of sexual harassment. Now, he originally denied the charge altogether. Later on, he apologized. So it's really not clear whether he did what it's claimed that he did. He said that he actually couldn't remember, but let's accept that he did this thing. This is what it boiled down to. He went out drinking with some of his students, all of whom were of legal drinking age, after one of his classes. After the bar closed, they went back, a number of them, a man and a woman student, went back with him to his office to continue their conversation. At one point, the male student left and the female student stayed on. At this point, he apparently moved to sit beside her, touched her physically, and the report said that he engaged in an inappropriate physical touch. I thought it was very interesting that it didn't say sexual, and he's never been charged with sexual assault. And in Canada, nearly anything, any kind of sexual touching can be considered sexual assault. So I'm assuming this was something minor enough that neither the student nor the university considered it sexual assault, but he touched her.
Below the knee or above the neck or something.
Maybe he brushed her hair out of her face, or something very minor. This was not a sexual assault. He touched her and he expressed some kind of romantic / sexual interest. That was it. Presumably, I don't know what happened exactly, but she left the office at that point. He did not try to force himself on her, anything like that. For that, he was investigated. He was suspended for a number of years, and there was an attempt in January of this year, and all of this happened in the fall of 2014. The investigation took place over the next year or so. From 2016 to today, he has not been back in the classroom. In January of 2019, there was an attempt made to bring him back into the classroom. He was going to teach one class. He'd had to take a course on, respectful workplace conduct. He was under very strict conditions about how he could interact with students, all that sort of thing. He'd offered a public apology, but that wasn't good enough. The students demonstrated. They set up a information booth. They claimed that he was a violent man, that he'd committed an act of sexual violence, and they made such a fuss that the university canceled his course, and it's now unclear what's going to happen. I assume that he will be retired. So this is the end of him, and he's considered, some sort of sex criminal, when in fact what he did was a minor transgression. Just outright lies in order to pretend to everybody that we weren't doing what we were doing, which was simply hiring women because they were women. Did you try to speak out on those committees, and what happened? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I did. And, in general, people would come to me and say, oh, I was really glad you said that. They would come to me and say that after the meeting. But you were presumably outnumbered. Yeah, I was outnumbered. I know since then you've had contact with people in Australia and in Australia academia as well. Your impression is the same thing's happening here, isn't it? Oh, yes. I mean, and when I'm talking about 1998, 1999. So now here we are 20 years later. That was going on throughout the 1990s. Now we have, as you know, in Australia, there are often women-only positions. So the pretense that men have any opportunity at all isn't any longer even maintained. Now, there's just out and out discrimination with, I think it was the University of Melbourne, the mathematics department a couple of years ago hired 3 women-only positions in mathematics. I'm in contact with a man, an astrophysicist, who was at an Australian university for many years and finally left and went to China because he realized he was never going to get a permanent position. Physics right now, physics departments in Australia are so keen to demonstrate their feminist bona fides that it's simply nearly impossible for a man, no matter what kind of record he has, to be hired. And I just find this outrageous, let alone the effect this is going to have on the development of science all across the Western world. They're not worrying about this in China. China is moving ahead, as are other Asian countries. But the impact on men, and this man in particular has written to me saying he knows so many very bright young physicists who have simply left academia altogether in disgust. The sense of resentment, the anger, the awareness that your own society doesn't want to give you the chance to use your gifts and to compete on an equal playing field. Now, I want to talk about your book, Sons of Feminism, which came about as a result of, as I do, you receiving thousands of stories from people about what's happening to them, and you decide to put together a whole collection of, and you put the call out for people to write about what it's been like living in this feminized world, and it was swamped with stories. I just want to talk about some of the ones. I mean, I really recommend this book. I think it's got some fantastic stories capturing what's happening out there, which is quite terrifying. But I want to just mention a few of the stories that really struck me, moved me. Particularly, I always think the one, I think, was an Indian family where the father ends up committing suicide. And the son, the adult son, writes about the fact he now feels he was complicit in
the family's rejection of him.
The father attempted suicide, and fortunately he was not successful. He didn't, yes, he didn't actually commit suicide. That wasn't maybe entirely clear in the essay actually, but yeah, that is one of the most poignant and powerful essays in the collection. He came to that realization that, you know, without even realizing it, he'd taken his mother and sister's side against his father. And once he came to rethink, you know, he could understand his father's sense of powerlessness actually in that family, knocking himself out. His father was a highly credentialed surgeon who was worked extremely hard, you know, knocked himself out doing 70-hour weeks or something tremendous, caring so much about his patients and you know, developing new techniques for patient care and all of this. And when he would come home, he would encounter an angry wife and a rebellious daughter screaming at him, you know, expressing their resentment and their dissatisfaction with him. And the son's realization that this is something that he now is having to enter into is it's very, very powerful. That, you know, his sense that men like him, high achieving men, very cerebral men, often have a great deal of trouble communicating with women, and they get into these situations where society in general tends to feel so much more sympathy for the woman and to see the man as privileged and entitled, when in fact he's doing everything he can for his family and getting very little in the way of recognition or thanks for it.
Thanks everybody for supporting me on my YouTube channel. I've got growing numbers of subscribers, which is really exciting. If you'd like to support me financially, go to my donate page on my website. Thanks a lot.